Welcome to Discuss With Us podcast, where we are unpacking the world through a Christian lens. I am your host, Darcy Durkowski, along with my husband, Brian, and our intention is to pose topics, trending and otherwise, and unpack them with the help of some research, insights from our different backgrounds, and even some listener input in a way that is thought-provoking and entertaining. So get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and discuss with us.
Welcome back to another episode of Discuss With Us. My name is Brian, along with my wife Darcy, across the way on the ones and twos.
Hello there.
How are you doing this week?
This week was an easier week than last week.
It's feast week.
We did.
And we have feasted.
Yes, we did. What were some of our feast meals?
Well, we just had ice cream for the first time in I don't know how long, so that happened.
You had ice cream for the first time in how long? I had ice cream last night.
Yeah.
While you were out at your gig.
I went all out, though. I had to put the puppy chow in it, too. So
yeah, it was something.
Go big or go home, right?
We also had chili dogs today, and with a side of chili cheese fries.
Yeah, all the things were had. I took this very seriously.
Yeah.
Never even heard of it before until now. But
seemed like a good time to adopt it, and a good one to adopt. We had leftover pistachio pudding from Easter. I ate
you
on
had
that
I
for
didn't
like
have
4 days.
More of that. Yeah, I lost like 16 or so pounds, I don't know, during Lent, which was awesome. And I probably gained like all of it back just this week. But, whatever. It's the whole point. Start anew now.
Yeah, hopefully we haven't regressed quite that badly, but I don't know.
It feels like it.
We'll do better this week, but it was a nice little feast week.
Yes. So it was, as a continuation, as we said last week, Easter doesn't just end everything. It's actually the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And
time of celebration.
Exactly. And for Catholics and some other Christians, we celebrate all the way up to Pentecost, which comes up, I think, this year, May 19th, our anniversary. Easy way to remember that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's 50 days from Easter, whenever that is. But so we're going to kind of touch on that when we get there. But yeah, so this week was a feast week.
Feasting I will not allow to last until Pentecost. And it's only supposed to be what, the octave? Is that what you said? So 8 days or so?
Yeah.
So I guess technically maybe we have one more day, but
yeah,
I think
I
we should
really
probably call it.
Well, we had a salad for dinner, so that counts,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. But anyway.
So this week we are going to talk about, and we're going to clarify this a little bit better, and this is going to be driven by Darce, I think, about, what did you call it? Homemaking, but
yes,
with a spin?
Yeah, kind of. I mentioned homemaking last week as kind of a potential topic. And then very quickly, when you were talking to me about like, where are we going with this?
I had no idea where to go with this. I was like, are we talking about sourdough starters or where are we going?
I was like, oh man, yeah, you're right. I do need to kind of hone in and focus and define what we're talking about, because there's quite a bit that we could unpack here, and probably will at some point.
You do like sourdough starters, so there's one.
I do, yeah. However, the point of today's homemaking topic is, I'll have to define it, but it's not like, are you a work from home mom, stay at home mom? Are you working out in the workforce? Like it'll be relevant for everybody. And one of the things that actually gave me this idea for a topic, and I read this a while back originally, and you'll hear me reference it probably quite a bit today. So I'm going to go ahead and cite my source here before I get started.
Cover all our bases so we don't get in trouble.
Yeah. So one of my favorite Instagram follows, and I don't even know how I came across her. Probably. Okay, so her name is Emily Stimson Chapman, and I think the way that I found her was because she has co-written several books with Scott Hahn.
Yes, I believe that was right. Yeah,
very well-known Catholic author. So, anyways, I had read a couple of books of hers, or even just excerpts. Followed her on Instagram, and everything that I just get something out of everything that she puts out.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a newsletter that I subscribed to, and a while back she did a topic, or I get a newsletter on the deep work of homemaking. So that's what
Ah,
it's titled. And so I'm going to read part of this here because, like I said, she says it better than I could. So,
no, I don't believe
um, okay, so it's so it says this. I think is the. I'm starting right way down in the middle of this article, but
she
um,
just did air quotes if y'all didn't see that.
oh, yeah. This, I think, is the crux of my struggle with the word homemaker. It's not the word itself, it's that the word is being used too often as a synonym for stay at home mom or
Mm.
housekeeper, while its deeper meaning and the more urgent work all too often go undiscussed. Let me explain. Despite how it's typically presented, the vocation of homemaker isn't just for mothers who don't work for pay. It's an urgent and vital call to every woman, married or single, fertile or infertile, whether she's working inside the home, outside the home, or from the home. It is one of women's greatest tasks in the world and an expression of what Pope St. John Paul II called the feminine genius.
Mm.
So I thought that kind of set
Yeah.
the stage for like where I'd like to take this topic. But if you are worried that this is going to be just all over motherhood and homemaking,
I'm fine with that. I just sit back here.
I did leave you a spot here.
Oh, nice.
Because and this was when I brought this up last week, was kind of where my head was at, was not just, motherhood, and not just the making of a home, but all the things that go into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we could do a whole series on homemaking here, so I'm going to try
And
to.
maybe will.
Yeah. Yes. So I'll try to kind of define what I wanted to cover today and get into. But um, what I just read of Emily Stimson Chapman's newsletter,
Good follow if you don't follow her.
yes, that's kind of the one of the things that I was thinking about is like housework versus heart work is what
Uh-huh.
she calls it somewhere else in this newsletter. And while I very much appreciate where at least my Instagram takes me these days, which is sourdough
Yeah,
starters
yours is
and
loaded with that.
and all these people that really are focusing on making their home and making it a good place and feeding their kids nutritious things and all this stuff that is very valuable. Um, it can get kind of twisted into and there's so much guilt that circulates out there too
Oh, yeah.
among mothers, especially, I
I'm
feel like,
sure.
where it's like, oh, I still feed my kids, Cheerios. I don't make them
Yeah,
scratch oatmeal
girls,
and
once you
stuff.
become moms, you're not like judging yourself on what you're wearing like you did in high school. Now it's like,
That's
what
so
did you
true.
feed your kid?
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I follow all those accounts because I do think that there's a lot to be learned there and everything, and I'm hanging on everybody's word there too. But that's I do think it can get twisted and make people feel like they are less than as far as a mother goes or as
Mm.
far as a homemaker goes. And so I do want to separate out. We're not necessarily focused on the housework today, talking about that, more about the, again, air quotes, heart work. Not to say that the housework isn't part of, what we want to do in making a home. And obviously can be a big piece of that too, but, not what we're focusing on
Yeah,
today.
fold those towels.
I did a lot of laundry before we
That's
came up
why I
here.
said that.
um, okay. But anyways, so one of the definitions that, and this was actually somebody that Emily Simpson Chapman, she shared her blog, I guess, on homemaking, and I
Mm.
wish I should have probably dug it up before we started
We
this,
just
but
ripped the whole thing.
yeah, I know. But she was just talking about how um, it's more about making your like homemaking in the sense that we're talking is more about making your home a welcome place where people, outsiders or, your kids that you're
Hmm.
raising, if that's the case, feel welcome, loved, and wanted.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's the homemaking that we are talking about today. And that can be felt and managed in any home that you have,
Uh huh.
whether it's a camper trailer or, you're renting an apartment somewhere or you've got a house or whatever it is,
Wherever.
wherever you're at, it's where you are, obviously. But how are we making our home feel welcoming and loving, and that those who enter it or are in it, living in it, are wanted? Um,
Well, and you had that like gender specific to the woman, right?
um, This part, no.
Oh,
I
okay.
think you can kind of separate it from here, and that's what I did. Was I think that making your home in that way, yes, it probably falls more on the.
She ran some stuff by me, but I was watching baseball, so I'm trying to keep it all straight now.
Um, I do think that a very heavy portion of the homemaking obviously falls on the mother because of just kind of our tendencies. And when I say mother here too, we're more just talking about like female and male roles. But I
Hmm.
did want to also discuss the male and or father role
Hmm.
in homemaking because I do think it's there. You heard some of this earlier, maybe while I was.
In between pitches, yeah.
It was before. Oh gosh, what's his name?
Jordan.
No, pitcher.
Oh, Blanco.
Yes. Okay. I got hung up on his first name. What's his first name?
Ronell
Ronell. Okay. Yeah. I don't know that one well enough. But yes, before Blanco had a hit. So I don't.
gave up a hit.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Gave up a hit. So I don't blame you for not listening to me. Anyway, um, but I broke this homemaking, into kind of the female slash mother's role, and then male slash husband father role.
I'm with you.
Okay. And what I thought was interesting is several sources that I read were talking about how um, women, we are everyone's like place of security.
Yeah, I did hear you say that earlier.
And that's kind of like the honestly the definition of motherhood, kind of
Hmm.
is being someone's
I liked that.
home and like sense of security,
Hmm.
which kind of took me back to like our personality test episode where we were talking about like how we have and again this is from Emily too, an innate orientation to the personal, whereas I think men tend to be more on the logistical
A little bit, yeah.
logic side.
Definitely in our house.
Yeah. But I think that can typically be said for,
Probably most, yeah.
yeah. Women are more in tune with the personal, and men not so much.
Well, and in our house, that sense of security, it's even probably more so because we have three boys.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
boys typically lean on their mamas,
Hmm.
and daddy has to rule with the iron fist. So,
Yeah. So one of the main things that I want to come across today, because obviously I'm not like an expert on homemaking, so I'm not here to
oh,
like
come
tell
on.
everybody how to do things. It's more so just I think what was on my mind about it, and I don't know. One of the main things is that homemaking is going to look so different for everybody. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things that was comforting to me in reading through some of these different deep dives into what homemaking is and looks like and all these things. Because, like I said, there's so much mom guilt
Yeah.
out there. For me,
Especially with the working moms.
yes. Well, and with the stay-at-home moms too. Just everything in between. Then you've also got like for me, I'm kind of a hybrid. I'm like a working from home
Literal.
mostly
Yeah.
mom. And so this isn't like some of the things that I see out there I feel like are trying to tell you like, you know, almost guilt you into one way of homemaking.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not even saying I don't appreciate those, all the sourdough baking and all of the things like that. I love all that, all the
Oh,
ones
me
that are
too.
out there homeschooling, and doing all the things and feeding nutritious foods and rev- I keep calling it like reverting back. I love all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but that does not equal homemaking. It can be done and should be done no matter what kind of mom you are.
Yeah, well, those are parts of it, but that's not like how you're defining it in this way, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and a work from home mom, a stay at home mom, an out in the workplace mom, we all are still charged with homemaking and can do it successfully.
Mm-hmm. Just may look different for
Yeah,
each
it will
house.
look different for each house. And so that's kind of the first thing that I wanted to get across here, is that I'm this topic doesn't exclude anybody, or you're not like disqualified if you don't
Mm-hmm.
fall into one of those
Yeah, and even if
categories,
you don't have kids yet or anything,
Exactly.
you're still in
Yeah.
that role.
Yes. Yeah, I keep saying motherhood and all these things, but it's also just the female role in general, I think. So that was the one of the big points that I wanted to make here. But the other thing is, like, again, regardless of what type, I'm again air quotes, what type of mom or female role we are at this point, um, what are we doing to make our homes a and us like a secure place
Mm-hmm.
for our spouse, for our friends, for our kids? Um, like, what are we doing? That's one of the things that I wanted to discuss, or even just kind of leave with listeners, I guess,
Yeah.
as something to think about. And for some of us, again, your go-to might be like, I want a spotless, well organized, um, very aesthetically pleasing home, so that my friends or my Bible study group, or my family, my husband comes home and enjoys that.
Oh, yeah.
um, that's how that's going to look for some people, and for some people it's going to look like, I don't care about my clutter, I just want you to come visit, and
I've
those.
never thought of like the security like that, but you're right.
Yeah. um, because I think there is, kind of, there can be security and almost like camaraderie and solidarity, I guess, in just being like, no, I want, again, I'll use the Bible study group. I want my Bible study group to come to my house, even if it's not in the tip top shape I wish it was in.
Right.
That can still be very welcoming and like kind of comforting to
Yeah.
people who maybe aren't themselves measuring up to that, higher standard of cleanliness and,
Mm-hmm.
and organization and stuff. So that's one way I think.
So what do you do for that? What
Hmm,
would you say is
where
your,
where would I fall?
yeah.
Um, Definitely somewhere in the middle. I don't ever put a high price on like having I feel like our like certain rooms organized, like our kids kids rooms, and even like their little playroom and stuff, because it's going to get played in, right?
Yeah.
Um but I do, if somebody's coming over, I mainly want the kitchen clean. I
Uh-huh.
would say first and foremost, and obviously places to, I can't have laundry on the couch at that point.
Yeah. I think we have done that a time or two, but
Yeah, probably so. But and really my only
nobody come over now.
yeah, I know. My only point in that is just, again, for people to feel welcome, um, and not like, oh, where do I sit?
Well, and yours goes beyond just people coming over, like with our kids too.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I don't want, I want the place to be pleasant for my kids too. Um, and just even thinking about like our oldest, he for the longest time had to have his bedroom spotlessly clean before he went to bed. So like
Yeah.
that kind of
Yet
tells
he
me
didn't
that
want to clean
he
it.
yeah, he would help at that time. But anyway, he that kind of I don't know, signals me that he appreciates a little bit of order.
Oh yeah.
And so again, as mom and the homemaker, I do want them to have that comfort. I've heard of um, people talking before, like if their parent was a hoarder or
Mm-hmm.
something. Um, and either, I don't know, there's been both scenarios, I feel like, where they become a hoarder to themselves because that's just what they
Yeah,
know, I
that's what
guess.
I
I don't
know.
know.
Yeah,
Or
they swing the complete opposite.
yes, or they swing the complete opposite and are like, I can't even visit my parents because, my mom's a
And
hoarder and
their house
I
has
can't.
nothing in it.
Exactly. So, um, but anyways, I think you just kind of have to take stock of that. And, you know, if, um, if you're not willing to, like, I don't know how to put this, like if the shape of your house is preventing you from um, having people over, then maybe do something about it. But also on the flip
Hmm.
side, um, if you're using the shape of your house to not invite people over, think again.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's really anything to glean from that because it's, but just definitely something to think about um, to make it a welcoming place.
So go a little more on this because that's like kind of specifically with the house, but I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like what you were saying there with the the woman's role is kind of like a sense of security, and I keep thinking
Yeah.
about, like I said, we have three boys, and I think like security is a nice word to put, but I think like emotionally you are the
Yeah.
security for them, probably, and myself too, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I do have to check myself. I've caught myself a couple of times and then also really one time kind of been put in my place, and maybe I'll tell about that a little bit too. But
Not by me.
yeah, no, not by you. I I feel like a lot of the emotional support and just motherhood in general is in the details,
Mm.
and I'm not really a details person a lot of the time. Um, and so in that way, it can kind of sometimes be a struggle for me. The example that keeps popping in my head is on the weekends, we do have this place we're trying to kind of get in order one.
Been said a time or two
Yeah.
before on here.
Yeah, one, project at a time. And I enjoy doing all of those things. And just get a huge sense of satisfaction when we get something like that checked off the list.
Mm-hmm.
So it is usually a focus of our weekends.
And
And
enjoyment.
yes, and enjoyment for sure. But the kids aren't always down for all of that all the time.
Well, and they're not at an age really
Yeah,
for all of that.
exactly. So, the example I keep thinking of is like, when we're out there working on a project and the kids are working well with us for a while, and then over some time they're like either getting hungry, ready to go inside, just ready for something different.
And that's the miracle of all three falling in line. Usually that doesn't even happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So typically I'm having to kind of pull myself off of whatever we're doing and go tend to that, or, give them something else to do or whatever.
Hmm.
And a lot of times I can get frustrated with that because it's like I want to, you
Yeah,
know,
you don't hide that well, I can tell.
thanks. But yeah, I'll get like, and not because I think you should go do it or something or take care of them, but just because I enjoy being out there
Yeah.
and I'm kind of having to be like sidelined, I guess. Um,
Now, we said you're a pyromaniac,
yeah, I know I do.
mildly.
Yeah, I like to be out burning the piles, um, but I do have to kind of quote unquote sideline myself sometimes and remember that, I'm the one that they want to go, well, snuggle up and watch a movie with, or more accurately, I'm the one that they want to get them a snack.
Yeah, because you'll do it.
Yeah. So, and that is all special work
And
to do.
bonding time.
and bonding time. Yeah, and I was reminded of that. And this is the part where I was saying that I was kind of put in my place one time. There is so much more to this little piece of this story that I'll tell, and
Small
maybe
fragment of it.
it honestly may become our next episode because it's been on my mind lately, but more on that later. I was talking with this lady that is in our neighborhood, let's say, and she kind of just walks our roads. And I had pulled over and was having a conversation. Again, more on that later. But um, I don't even know how we got on this, but I was saying something about, I was telling her, yeah, we spend so much time working on our property, and a lot of the times, I can't do as much as I'd like to or help as much as I'd like to on some of the projects because I'm, having to kind of tend to the kids. And she really kind of like put me in my place, and she was like, um, that's where you need to be. This is your kids' time to bond with you, and your husband will take care of the property, and you'll get more opportunity to do that later. But
Hmm.
this, where you should be right now, is bonding with them. And I was like, oh, shoot.
And normally you don't take criticism well, so.
um, and so, anyways, that really did kind of strike me like, oh, yeah. Um, because I do think it can also be part of our culture to be like, well, just bring your kids along. And we do that a lot too.
Yeah.
Not to say we don't do that. Um, but ultimately, kind of in this stage especially, like it's their world, and our place is kind of to just be their sense of security. And a lot of times that does mean sidelining myself from the projects maybe, and attending to their needs.
Yeah.
So, um, that's a little on that, but that's enough on me.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Um, but I guess before I kind of close this part out too, just whether you're a um, working from home mom or a stay at home mom, um, or out in the workplace mom, um,
Or not a mom yet.
or not a mom yet. Thanks for keeping reminding me that. Um, I think it is valuable to give thought to um, the fact that we are our spouse, our family, and maybe some of our friends, like a place of security for them.
Mm.
And what are we doing to offer that to somebody, or to how are we making our homes more welcoming and loving, and making the people that enter feel wanted, whether it's your kids or guests, friends, a Bible study group, or your spouse.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's really all I need to say about that because, like I said, I can't tell everybody how it's going to look. It's going to look so differently for everybody that I think it's just something that I think it's a good thing to
Well,
think about for yourself.
and for the younger people, you and I talked about this earlier because both of us grew up with stay-at-home moms for the most
Yeah.
part, and most people in this day and age are living a two parent two people two income house.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that maybe we'll cover this next part first and then come back to it. But the challenges that we face because there is no like guidelines or course on
yeah, right.
how
There may be a book, but it doesn't work.
yeah, there may be a book, but there's no like workbook
Yeah.
on how to do all these things. So yeah, we'll come back to that part, but I do want to cover
All right, that's called a tease.
yeah. um you know, like I said, the homemaking, a lot of that does, I think, probably fall on the female role. But one of the things that I was thinking about with this is that I think the male and the male slash like fatherhood role, I think you guys have such an ability to set the tone of the home.
That's right. It's what I do every day.
Okay. Anyway, But seriously, I think that you guys have such an opportunity. While we may make it feel welcoming and loving, hopefully, and all these things, um, I think that you guys have, I think that the men have such an ability to set the tone of the household, which is obviously very important since that's where the majority of your life will revolve around is your household. Um, and so thinking about that, like, I guess for an example, um, if a husband is uh, disrespectful to his wife, you're setting a tone for your kids.
Mm.
Let's just use a family example here. Um, or if you are, what was some of the examples I told you earlier? Like if a husband is,
Well, you said like getting dragged to church
oh,
versus
yeah.
like leading.
Yeah, so like if a husband is having to be kind of dragged with his family to church, that's what the kids are going to know of church. Like that's how they're going to feel about it too. Um,
What's popping in my mind literally right now is almost the like in the Bible when it's like women uh, be submissive to your husband
mm-hmm.
because the man's leading the house. But then the flip side of that is obviously husbands cherish your wives.
Yes.
And kind of to your point of the security at home, like
Mm-hmm.
a woman is making this warmth around the home. And
Mm-hmm.
whether honestly, even if you're not married,
Mm-hmm.
if you're just going over for a date or whatever, but obviously we have 3 kids, and you're doing all these things to create a loving, warm, secure
Mm-hmm.
environment. And then, but I kind of set the tone for
Mm-hmm.
what that house looks like,
Yeah.
with my kind of attitude towards you, towards the kids.
Yeah. Well, towards me, towards the kids, towards, the things that we as a family hold important, all of those things. I think that you have a very powerful um, opportunity
Yeah.
to mold um, how your household runs.
So I didn't really get to prep a lot for this because this was all kind of in your head up until right before we started. But all right, so let me see where you're going with here. Um, so yeah, I think the man sets the tone in the home, and all I can do is think about just ours in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've talked before, and we'll talk more in depth on this about the man being the spiritual leader of the home.
Yes.
That was actually a pretty big decision on how we got to raising a Catholic family.
Mm-hmm.
That was a pretty big sticking point. But it's kind of to your point of being drug or leading to church. So you're setting that spiritual tone in
Mm-hmm.
the home for me with the boys. And I always find it funny. I would say 90 to 95% of the time, you're the one actually doing the discipline.
Yeah.
You're at home all day, but
Yeah, just by sheer amount of time that I spend with them.
exactly.
Right.
And I think for that, I mean, that's how it was for me growing up too.
Mm-hmm.
But there is just a different level that, the boys will grow out of, I'm sure, hopefully not for a long time, but even just, I mean, you've called me on the phone and just said like your dad's listening right now.
Yeah.
And and so far that works on itself. But it's not just the
Well, because I think that while a woman may find herself enforcing it more often as far as discipline goes, just by sheer amount of time that we're spending with the kids, maybe, I think the man has the ability to set whatever the standard is, like
no,
what's,
exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like,
acceptable and not.
I think it almost gets confused. Like you dole out a lot of the discipline, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're the disciplinarian. I think I actually am.
Yeah.
I think I set the tone of what flies and doesn't. Now you can trump me at any moment, and you do because I'll I'll get a little maybe more upset than I should with some things, but I kind of do that. But here's my point: I kind of do that on purpose.
Yeah.
If I'm leaning this way and you decide you want to intervene and say, no, well, this is okay, or no, they don't need to get in trouble for this.
Mhm.
That's fine. You
Mhm.
can trump me whenever you want. But I always want, in our specific home with 3 boys, which I do think makes a difference,
Mhm.
um, I always want to be
Leaning on the other side of it, kind of.
a little bit, because I don't want, like I said, we have a unique home. We have 3 boys. And frankly, when I always wanted, obviously, a son, when you think about having a family, I did not have any idea I would have 3 of them, and 3 of them that close. And it was somewhat stressful at first, of the responsibility of raising 3 men.
Mhm.
And especially with the times of today. I
Mhm.
mean, more of a feminine outlook is the way of the world, kind of.
Mhm.
Being softer, things like that. People
Mhm.
don't do any corporal punishment, or everything is everybody love everybody. And
Mhm.
and I'm not saying I'm like 1920s dad over here, but at the same time, I think a lot of those aspects work,
Mhm.
and help you build strong character and strong leadership. And so I really try to do my best to kind of err on that side with 3 boys.
Yeah. Um, yeah, my dad always, I still remember him always saying, whenever he would discipline us, probably almost every time. I don't know, it happened a lot, so maybe not every time, but he would often remind us, that disciplining us was more painful for him than it was for us. Whenever we're
Well, you were his daughter. Maybe for y'all. I don't know about for your brother.
yeah, but but he would always make sure that we knew that it came from like a place of love and that he didn't enjoy doing it. He was just trying to make us good people.
Yeah, it's like a unique thing,
Mhm.
because it's not like I feel like, oh, I'm dad, I decide what's right and what's wrong, and
Mhm.
mom just figures, just fits into that. But at the same time, I think, uh, as the man, you're kind of on the extreme sides of,
Mhm.
these are our rules of the house.
Mhm.
These are the guidelines you're going to have while you live here. This is what you're going to do. And I tell you all the time, it's funny because you work from home primarily,
Mhm.
but you travel.
Yeah.
And talking about how those roles work, like when you're gone, the home runs completely different. And the boys fall in line without that sense of comfort. I think they can't wait for mom to get home, but they fall in line with what's going on. But we struggle without you at the same time.
Yeah. One thing that I read earlier, and it was actually in reference to Jesus. It was talking about how Jesus he wasn't a nice guy.
Mm,
He was kind and he
hmm.
was good, but that's different than a nice guy. And I think that's kind of like what it can sort of help give some, I don't know, background and color to what we're trying to say here is like because part of what it was saying was, good people aren't afraid to, nice people are afraid to call anybody out.
Mm.
Good people aren't afraid to call someone out when they're wrong, but they do it in a kind way.
Yeah, and
Um,
because I feel like I'm coming off just like all discipline right here, and that's obviously a big part of it. But let me go a step further, because I'm in my second year now of coaching t-ball,
mhm,
and last year I was kind of trying to figure my way, and I was second guessing myself a lot with this. But it's not all just discipline; it's more of like setting the boundaries,
yes.
because I pride myself on this. I try to be really active with the boys,
Mhm,
but active towards pushing them for independence as
mhm.
well. Even if it's t-ball, right? You're having to like pick
Herd
their
cats.
arm up, pick them up, and set them in the box where you want
Mhm,
them to swing and stuff. But my constant goal is getting them to be comfortable and know how to do it themselves.
mhm,
And when they're in the field doing the same thing, and I get more worn out than they do during the games, because I am setting the example for them. Yes,
mhm,
I'm the disciplinarian even out there.
mhm.
I I have rules. They have to follow them, even though they're 4 and 5 years old,
Yeah.
and they all come from different homes. I don't know who's
Yeah.
doing
No, that
what where,
is.
But when
and
they're on
ask of
that
them.
field with me, they have to abide by what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. It's why I like to coach is setting that male example for them. That's what
Yes.
they constantly say boys need. And like I
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm talking specific about boys because that's what I have. But it's
And
not
I still think
all.
it's applicable. And you know how I was saying, like, I think from on a male standpoint, you set the standard. I like what you were saying there about not just standard, but like the boundaries. Like
Hmm.
you've got the boundaries that you're putting in place. I like
Yeah.
that better than saying standard.
So I have their rules, and but at the same time, when the game's going on, I am running around trying
Mm-hmm.
to encourage them, cheer them up. If a boy is sad because the ball didn't get hit to him, I'm running over there trying to get in his head and get him amped up for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
If they swing and they miss the ball and they hit the tee, I'm definitely trying to comfort him and be like, "Hey, you're all right. Just reset yourself.
Yeah.
You've got this. Watch the ball." So you want to be that
Positive
positive.
reinforcement too.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so 1 minute I could be getting onto your butt because you need it,
Mm-hmm.
or telling you to go sit down. But then at the same, once you're past that, you want to be that sense of encouragement and try to be that positive example for them.
Yeah, and I think that that's how you were saying like I'm not some 1920s now, which I don't even know if that's the right time
I don't know.
era.
I
I'm not
just
even
picked a
sure, but
decade. I don't know.
you're not some like I don't know heavy duty disciplinarian, and that's all you do because it's not all you do. And I think that's the biggest thing is like I think that um, as disciplinarians, you have to make sure that you are heavily involved with the positive reinforcement and just heavily involved in general.
Well, and that
You
positive
can't,
example, like being drugged
yes,
to church versus leading to church.
right. And so, yeah, you can't just try to set the boundaries and then sit back. You have to be heavily involved in
Well, and then
coaching them
the
along the whole way,
positive
too.
example. Remember the one time one of our kids, I won't name him, smarted off to you, and that was probably the most trouble he ever got in.
Yeah.
And I was just like, "You will not do that." And I
Yeah.
told him, it wasn't that you won't do that to your mom. I told him, I said, "You won't do that to my wife."
Yeah.
And that was how I wanted him to take that in.
Yeah.
Is that's not cool, man. You're not going to talk like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, setting the boundaries is a good way of putting it, but then also just being as heavily involved as you can all along the way. And you do a really good job of that.
Only because we have such a secure home.
So cheesy. But since you said that, I do think it is a good balance.
Hmm.
I think, and a lot of times, I think that that we are having to kind of, it's still teamwork, even though we have like our defined roles.
Hmm.
It is still very much teamwork. Um, you know, one of the interesting polls I did some polls on Instagram this week before this topic, and
Oh.
one of them was, do you and your spouse share all responsibilities or do you have like your own set of chores?
Mm.
And that was maybe the most like mixed bag one.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
interesting.
probably 50-50 because yeah, everybody's teamwork looks different, but teamwork nonetheless. Um, so we talked about you being kind of the source of discipline and strength, which is one of the notes I'd had here, and then also being the spiritual head of the household.
Hmm.
So, do you have any more notes on that?
I have no notes on anything. I'm just shooting from the hip here, dear. Um, Spiritual leader of the home. It's kind of like we said. I'm a driving force behind what we do spiritually. And we'll get into different prayers and all kind of stuff, but I think I always want to set the example of even as simple as like making sure we're saying grace, or like we have
Yeah, you
nighttime
do.
prayers for the
Mhm.
boys, or just I don't ever want to get caught being like, we don't need to go to church today, we're fine, and
Mhm.
taking church seriously.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is it can look different, maybe people don't have their set bedtime prayer or all these things, but it's really I think it's the level of value and importance that you put on
Well, and then here's a funny one that anyone who goes to church with us may, and this is kind of, you don't even know, this is just in my head.
Okay.
So for all three of our kids so far, when they're young, they really don't behave well in church, right? They're not
Can't help it.
ready for it. Yeah. And I always, only rarely will you like take them out.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much my defined
Duty.
role. I do
Hmm.
it no matter what. And look, part of it is they can get heavy after an hour service, and I can carry them around a little bit easier, and you deal with that a lot more
Hmm.
during the week. But another portion of it is I want them to associate even from a young age just church in general with me. And so even if we're in the back or if I take them outside or
Hmm.
something like that, I want them to associate Sunday and morning and church and everything with dad and what dad's doing. It's not dad looking to go to
Just
the
showing
back of the
up.
church, yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's a
just
good
get
point.
out of it. It's just because if we do take them out and stuff like that, then I'm having to talk to them and spend time and different things with them. And so I find Sundays and especially around church to be a crucial point
Good
of
opportunity.
with dad. Yeah.
I do remember being at a like Christmas service one time, and you took one of our boys to the back after they were acting up, and I remember her commenting to us later, like, it was just never even a question. You just picked him up and took him to the back, and I just could not believe, that you could that you were so willing to handle that. And I was like, well, yeah. So it's just funny, different perspective. Can we tell the quick little story about what happened in church this weekend?
Oh yeah.
We
On
were
Easter.
visiting. No, no, no.
Oh,
We were visiting a church, and
this weekend I'm
yeah,
behind.
this weekend we were visiting a church in that we don't normally go to, and so Dylan, he's really young and just pretty much always needs to be taken to the back at some point because he just has no idea how to behave in church.
Yeah.
And then Clyde, our middle one, it's tough right now because he can be good, quote unquote, like he's not acting up,
Well, we went at a
but
completely different time and on a different day. We went on
well,
Saturday
no,
in the
but I'm not
afternoon.
even saying he wasn't being bad, but the thing with him right now is he doesn't know how to whisper, and I
Yeah.
keep begging him, whisper, 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 and he just cannot get it yet.
Yeah.
And so I feel bad, but he can be so distracting because he just sits there and talks. And so finally, I sent Clyde back there with Brian as well. And so now there was two little boys and Brian back there in the cry room, mind you, and they were I don't
It's an
know,
old
giggly.
church
It's an old
and
church. They were giggly. You could still kind of hear them. But some lady walked back there and told Brian that they were. How did she put it to you?
she just said she said they're loud, like
They're loud,
they're loud, right? It's like,
like
yeah, I'm
we can
doing
still
what I
hear you.
can.
And so yeah, so anyways, Brian ended up having to take them outside. So PSA, if that's ever how you're feeling, I think you need to be recentered on what church is about.
That's why dad takes him to the back. You would not have handled
I
that
would
very
not have handled
graciously.
that well. No, I would not have handled that well. But anyway,
Go
okay.
back to your tease from earlier.
Which one? I don't know. What was? Oh, talking about. Well, wait. I'm not done with
Oh.
fatherhood. Um, I was. This was another article, and I don't even know the source of this one that I was reading. But
We are article deep today.
yeah. Anyway, I was reading a lot because I was having this one wasn't just kind of a natural one for me, even though I picked the topic. So it was talking about how fatherhood and just the male role is. Let's see. It was saying that you should be the leader, the laborer,
Check.
lo-
Check.
loyal, learner, and lover. I really liked where it was saying the learner, and what it was referencing there was 1 Peter 3:7, where it talks about, husbands, you should basically like work hard to understand your wives,
Hmm.
which I thought was, I don't know, very insightful for, here you were the spiritual head of the household.
Mm-hmm.
It has the Bible has all of these scriptures, several different scriptures that say like, wives submit to your husbands,
Yeah,
and
what I was at
there's
earlier.
so
Yeah.
much to be unpacked there than
Mm-hmm.
just saying like wives submit to your husbands. There's
Yeah.
a whole lot of context behind all of that. Part of which I found in that when it was saying, learn your wives is like you need to work to understand us and therefore hopefully
It's
support and lead
impossible.
us. I knew you were going to say something like that. But I just thought that was really good. So, husbands, you have a great opportunity to set the tone of your home before and after you have kids in it, I think. What you accept and the things that you do and the boundaries that you set the tone for your home.
Which is interesting because I'm thinking about it like even like you said before you have kids, almost even like before you get married, which is kind of funny
Mm-hmm.
because when you think about just dating,
Yeah.
that's where it's like, oh, I'll let this slide. And on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
When if a woman's infatuated with a man, it's like that's where you always hear like I'll change him later. I really like him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And same thing for like thinking of like setting a tone. Like I don't know, maybe it's just myself, but at first you're almost like scared to do anything that might rock the boat.
Yeah.
Um, and but that can almost get you into trouble later if you're
Yeah.
not. But then it's also kind of funny just the subconscious way that we probably do it throughout like because I'm
Yeah.
thinking back on like past relationships, other
Right.
things like how you're already setting those tones without even thinking it really.
Yeah.
Just interesting.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And, saying like husbands, you set the tone sounds so set in stone,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not. It's something that I think is a constant thing you can constantly work on, which is also what I wanted to talk about. And first, let's cover the challenges that we face
Okay.
with motherhood, fatherhood, household management, homemaking.
Got it.
I was just thinking about this and thinking just how crazy it is because there's not really a homemaking class in high school, right? Or college. I mean, maybe there are some,
It's
but
home ec.
well, yeah, but okay, that's like, what, how to make biscuits and a
I don't
floral
know. I didn't
arrangement or
take it.
something. I don't know either. Anyway, the point is there's so little prep that is really done,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. I guess you do have like your own raising, obviously, and that's what everybody probably reverts to and either tries to exactly emulate
Mm-hmm.
or tries to run the other direction if it wasn't a good experience,
Yeah. Right.
But really that's like all you have to go on is your own personal experience. And then like I said, if you even with that, like for example, what I was thinking earlier is my childhood, we lived on family property that obviously we were very blessed to live on, and so much of my childhood was spent outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that.
With family, you had
Yes,
family
with
very
family
close.
on the property and everything. And my mom stayed home for kind of our early years and then got back out in the workplace a little later. Um, but so just thinking about like kind of the way I grew up. Well, I, one of the things that I felt strongly about wanting to emulate for our family is that outdoors
Mm-hmm.
space, which,
No, you were always big on that.
yes, just room for childhood kind of. And but for us that means I work too because there
Mm-hmm.
is no way that we would afford this place on one income.
No, and that's most
That's
people.
most people these days, yeah, just because of kind of the market and everything where we're at. And so therefore trying, in an effort to emulate something that came from my childhood, I am
Mm-hmm.
having to go about it differently.
Yeah.
And so just thinking about like about that and figuring that out, and then you pair with someone else in the family, like your spouse,
Yeah.
who they have their own things they're trying to emulate or figure out or work through or maybe run from. And it's just so much to figure out, and there's no real guidebook for it.
Yeah. No, and we have an even more interesting dynamic there. You would think it's easy because I come from a similar background.
Right.
My mom stayed home until I was at least in junior high. Ma- Yeah, junior high was when my mom was. So my entire life, my mom was
Hmm.
at home as a child. And so we had similar backgrounds there, and that did give us a good starting point and foundation on things we wanted from with the kids. But
Hmm.
then we are doing it differently,
Yeah.
which made us have to constantly check ourselves like, are we doing this all
Well,
right?
yeah,
Because
and that's the thing is like, I find myself questioning a lot of times like, okay, is this still what I want, or
yeah,
are we going about this okay? And talking about like mom guilt, I know there's dad guilt too, like just trying to, because I feel like most of us are pretty much just fumbling
yeah,
through this a little bit. Maybe other people are more lucky to I don't know, be
we're the
following
only
it.
ones out here feeling like this. And it's like, what are they talking about? Just do it.
Yeah. Um but anyways, there's just and you know, it's I think this is part of what I read earlier, but like the how homemaking is one of the biggest responsibilities that we'll ever have.
Yeah.
And yet,
That's what I mean, when you tie it into like having kids and stuff, it's what you're here for.
yeah, but there's like not really a great guidebook these days, or I don't know what I'm trying to say, like coursework or anything that you do. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of have to figure it out.
Well, and everyone's home is going to look different. All these
Yeah.
roles we're talking about, they do overlap and
Mhm.
have a lot of similarities to them. And and we'll do this in another episode about things you should talk about before you get married.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I was going to say is like really the only quote unquote coursework that you would have for something like this is, maybe before you're getting married, if you're doing some kind of retreat or classes or
yeah, we
anything like
had to
that.
do one, and that was
Yeah, and it was helpful.
yeah,
But anyways,
but
just
that's it.
yeah, I know. And so that's one thing I wanted to touch on was just kind of like, I don't know. Again, maybe y'all all have it figured out, but we sure don't. And if
Shh,
you
don't tell
don't,
them.
you're not alone. And I think that there is ample reason that we're all just kind of, I don't know, trying to figure this out, because while, like we said, it's probably the most important work that we'll ever do, there's also not a black and white answer for how we should all go about it.
I think as a good example to kind of tie all this up here, if you and this works for anyone who's listening, if you have kids and you feel like you're struggling, I think maybe this is a good time to sit down with your spouse and kind of go over um, what your specific homemaking life looks like from both husband and wife and how
Well, and
you're
what the
doing it with the
priorities
kids.
are.
Yeah.
Make sure you're in alignment.
And
Hopefully you are.
and if you're married without kids or
Hmm.
not married yet and maybe just in a relationship, I think it's a good
Practice.
practice to maybe get in and kind of talk about some of those things, what you think it's going to look like, where people's, because all of us are individual on some of those strengths and weaknesses
Yeah.
and whatnot, but just kind of mapping out what that's going to look like, I think it might save you a little bit
Of
of
grief.
heartache later.
Yeah.
Um, and
One of the main things that I wanted to say here too is that because even in thinking through all of this, I was thinking about like kind of evaluating what we've done thus far with our family,
mhm.
and thinking about a couple of areas that we could, improve or kind of change our approach on. We'll talk later. No,
Okay.
no, but it just was making me think like what we could be doing better. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things to think about here, and what we kind of why I wanted to bring up this topic is just to give you food for thought and present an opportunity to um, get in alignment if you're not in alignment with your spouse on kind of your how you're making your home thus
Yeah.
far, and redirect if you need to in some different areas.
No, yeah, and the last thing I was going to say was if you're not struggling and you think things are working great,
Yeah.
it's still a good time to talk and maybe map out what those roles are looking like.
Yeah.
And I always like to say sharpen your strengths. So,
Yeah. Okay.
all right, well, that's going to wrap up this episode. I think we talked that one maybe around in circles. I'm not sure.
Maybe we'll see. I don't know.
That's what we like to do here.
Yeah.
For our next episode, what we're going to do is, and this was another good idea of Darcy, is how, and I think you said it like how currently or when.
How is God speaking to you, or how has God spoken to
Yeah.
you? And I referenced earlier a story about a lady who roams our roads here, who we still see
Yes.
often. And I'll tell a little story about her next week.
You've got all kind of teases on this
I
episode.
know. But how God used her to talk directly to me. So I'll also be gathering during the week, hopefully, maybe some other stories of people who have heard very clearly from God, or maybe not so clearly and figured out later what it was.
Yeah, and where we're going to go with that is also like, I think biblically, how, there's so much God speaking directly in especially Old Testament, right? And then what that looks like today.
Yeah.
And
how we can listen for him.
Exactly. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Hopefully you got some good discussion points and things to talk about with you and your spouse. And now that we have unpacked the world on our definition of homemaking this week, you go discuss.